It stays cold across Scotland, with further hill snow expected into the day on Thursday. Outbreaks of rain at lower levels and certainly plenty of showers or longer spells of rain elsewhere across the country. The spells of rain will be interspersed by brighter intervals, and it's not going to be quite as windy as it has been during the last 24 hours, with wind gusts of 40 to 50 miles an hour. 12 Celsius in the south, 5 to 8 further north, so staying chilly across Scotland. And Friday starts off bright in many places, particularly towards central and southeastern parts of the country, but there'll be further cloud and outbreaks of rain elsewhere. Again, hill snow or even snow to lower levels across northern Scotland and into the weekend. Some heavy hill snow in the north, whilst elsewhere we'll see wet and windy weather.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
GB News is Britain's news channel, and now you can support it. All you have to do is scan that QR code that's up on your screen right now, or you can go to gbnews.com/support and become a GB News member. You'll have fantastic benefits. We're also going to organise special events where you as GB News members can meet the presenters, the on-screen faces. Scan the QR code or go to gbnews.com/support. Thank you so much.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
delicious?
mental?
Put in your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa!
Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Have a great Saturday night with me, Leo Curse, on the Saturday Night Showdown. It's a crazy world out there, so come and make fun of it with me, my panel of comedians, and a couple of people who actually know what they're talking about. The Saturday Night Showdown is your front row ticket to the clown show, every Saturday, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good evening with GB News. A police investigation is underway in Sheffield tonight after a car hit a crowd of people, killing one 46-year-old man and injuring several others. This news just breaking, and South Yorkshire Police saying a 23-year-old man has been arrested on suspicion of murder and a 55-year-old man on suspicion of attempted murder. Emergency services were called to the scene shortly after 2 o'clock this afternoon following reports of violence and disorder in the area. Police say the call-out was underway when the car hit a group of people. So a murder investigation underway in Sheffield tonight after one man has died after a car hit a crowd of people. Now, Storm Garrett hit the UK today, leaving homes without power and drivers trapped in their cars as snow, wind and rain caused flooding and closed roads. Police Scotland declared a major incident, in fact, as snow brought cars to a complete standstill on the A9 to Aviemore. That road has since reopened fully both directions. And 27,000 homes in northern Scotland also experienced power cuts, with the local energy company there, SSEN, saying they have restored power to 8,000 homes. They're currently still working hard to reconnect the rest. Passengers on the East Coast main line between London and Scotland were told not to travel, and thousands of people at airports experienced delays, with flights grounded as well. Multiple weather warnings remain in place tonight across the rest of the UK. And ferry passengers were facing delays of up to 3 hours today at the port of Dover. That was due to the French police going sick. And there was increased demand at the port as well today as people tried to get away for a post-Christmas trip. There are no queues now at Dover, officials saying border checks taking about 5 to 10 minutes. The Chancellor, Jeremy Hunt, has announced that the spring budget will be set out on the 6th of March next year. Reports are also coming from Downing Street that they could axe inheritance tax and reduce income tax. So Keir Starmer has seemingly instructed his front bench team to finalise their manifesto plans, telling shadow ministers to have their policy proposals ready by mid-January. There were 0 migrant crossings over the Christmas period for the first time since current records began. The Foreign Secretary, James Cleverly, tweeted in the last couple of hours saying no crossings took place across the English Channel on Christmas Eve, Christmas Day or Boxing Day this year. That's the first time since 2018. It means there have now been 10 consecutive days without any arrivals recorded, with poor weather conditions being a contributing factor. The number of people shopping in high street sales across the UK was down more than 20% on Boxing Day. Figures from MRI software found that while footfall was up before 3 o'clock in the afternoon, it was significantly lower across the day as a whole. The group said the only location to experience an overall rise in high street visitors was in central London. That's the news on GB News across the UK on TV, in your car, on digital radio and on your smart speaker. This is Britain's news channel.
Hello and welcome to Headliners with me, Simon Evans. Joining me tonight, we have 2 top comedians, Cressida Wetton and Francis Foster. And hopefully no sign of a mutiny or any other sort
Well,
of
the night is young, isn't it, Simon?
If there's any nonsense from you, I shall be throwing my papers on the floor. So, let's have a look at the front pages. Daily Mail to kick us off. Hunt plan to slash death tax by half. The death tax nomination there. Giving you their political view. The Times, Labour will promise big expansion of childcare, and Margaret Thatcher saying goodbye to Jacques Delors one last time. The Times, Labour will promise big expansion of childcare. That's a picture of it there on the beach. And Financial Times, global defence order books bulge as Ukraine puts budgets on war footing. The Eye, homes bought up for axed HS2 rail line are rented out for millions. That sounds like corruption. The Guardian, domestic abuse, survivors have lost trust in us. Met. And the Star, gridlock. They seem to be implying that that Tony the Tiger is involved. Anyway, those are your front pages. So, kicking off our in-depth look to the front pages with the Daily Mail. Cressida.
OK, Hunt plan to slash death tax by half. So Hunt apparently, he's set the 6th of March for the vital pre-election budget, as he calls it, vital pre-election budget. He's talking about slashing it by half. I read earlier in The Independent, Rishi's thinking of binning it all together. So this is classic joined-up Conservative Party planning.
What would be the way the half would be the entry level, the threshold, or would it be because it's you don't pay anything at all until 350 grand, I think, and 500 if you actually give your house to a child or grandchild. So.
So it might not be. It might be on the value of the property,
might be on
not
the value,
on the tax.
then it's suddenly at 40%, which is quite a big. Because, like in income tax, you get the first 10 grand free, and then you get a certain rate, and then it goes up a little bit each time. It's a bit of a blunt instrument. Well,
it really is, isn't it? And it's one of these things that doesn't apply to most people, and then the people it does apply to, it's really serious.
What they say is, and I heard the great Jacob earlier speaking on this, and I followed his argument. The argument is not so much that it's not fair, although there are some people, of course, who say, well, I've already paid tax on this once, why should I pay it again? Other people say, well, you know, the person whose money that was is dead now, so if you're going to tax anyone, taxing the dead is probably... That goes back and forth. But the Rees-Mogg brain identifies the serious issue as being one which is to do with capital allocation. So people trying to avoid inheritance tax make decisions about where to put their wealth that are not for the benefit of the country generally. So it's actually quite a good thing to reduce inheritance tax just to get growth and investment going.
Right.
You probably hadn't heard that before, Chris. You don't follow Jacob as closely as I do.
I'm a huge fan. He's very popular, Simon.
Yeah,
I don't
he is.
know, he's
going to be the star of, I think, Story 14. What do you think of that argument, Francis?
Well, I think it's quite an interesting argument. I would go with a more, dare I say it, cynical note. It's almost like the Tories have 6% in the polls and there's a general election next year and they're desperately trying to appeal to their voter base.
But who are they going to... There's the point. Not many people pay this, and they certainly won't be paying it in the next sort of year or so. You know, generally speaking, not that many people die in any given... It would be much more populist to lower VAT, to lower income tax, to maybe...
It's almost like they're clueless, Simon.
Yeah, do you think it's just sheer cluelessness?
Yeah. Whereas before, I would say, and I would go with your argument, but looking at this shower of politicians, let's just call them that, I wouldn't put it past them to think that this is somehow going to move the dial.
OK. What is the Financial Times going with, Francis, based on your cynicism towards the Daily Mail's financial arguments?
Well, I actually think this is a very interesting story, Simon. And the FT goes with the order books of the world's biggest defence companies are near record highs after growing by more than 10% in just 2 years because of rising geopolitical tension, including the conflict in Ukraine. And what this is actually saying is that we are going from what is called a unipolar world, which is America is a policeman of the world, to a world where we have China, we have Russia, who are now starting to compete with the United States. As a result of that, we have more and more conflicts that are starting to arise. We've seen the Middle East, we've seen Ukraine. There have been rising tensions between Azerbaijan and Armenia. We've seen the threat of war between Venezuela and Guyana over oil. And as a result of that, there's always going to be winners, and the winners, lo and behold, are the arms companies who are rubbing their hands.
Industrial complex, there's always...
Yes.
I mean, it's interesting, the Ukraine one. I mean, I think a lot of people said right from the get-go that was being provoked quite nakedly by military-industrial complex interests in America, that they were pushing for war, even as there were other actors who were trying to take the heat out of the situation. But I think that's run its course. Honestly, I don't think it's going to go on for very much longer.
You don't think the war in Ukraine is good? Why do you say that?
Because Ukraine is running out of...
Because the average soldier is 57
they're just running out of men
like
to fight, and they've released extraordinary guidelines now as to who is eligible to fight and who must come back and put on uniform. It's too depressing to... I mean, it would be black comedy if it wasn't real. It's extraordinary.
Well, it sounds like Dad's Army, doesn't it?
Having two missing feet is no longer, an adequate... dispensation to get you signed off. I just think the numbers, the demographics, tell their own story there. Whether or not the Middle East is going to continue to fuel defence spending, and I mean, that's basically a US decision, isn't it? It's how much money America put into Israel. But I don't know. Do you feel it's a more dangerous world? What do you think, Cressida? Does it feel like...
Well, we know about the danger now, don't we? We've all got
Yeah.
Twitter and we can see it. I mean, yeah, it's terrifying, isn't it? I can't see defence spending going down.
No.
Doesn't seem likely, does it? If you're going to invest, I would invest in this stuff.
It's very rarely been a bad call, it has to be said, over the years. Tobacco's the other one that's reliable.
Oh.
God, what a miserable world.
Yeah.
Never mind. Moving on to the Times, Cressida.
Labour plans thousands of new nursery places in primary schools. So Labour planning to put the little kids, the up to fives, in the big schools, but in their own little bit of it.
Yeah.
And the idea is now that from being a toddler to the end of primary school, the parents can avoid looking after them. So that's good, isn't it? If people want to go out to work, I don't know. I mean, I think it is good. It encourages people to have kids. It will make it a bit easier, won't it?
Anything that encourages people to have kids at the moment is probably a good thing.
Yes.
Especially the right sort of people, obviously.
And Simon wants to live in a society where he will be giving out the licence. Yes, you, not you, mate. Off you go. I've seen your A-level grades. A-levels, not even A-levels. GMBQ, no thank you.
There's no easy answer to all this stuff, is there? Because honestly, we do have extraordinarily expensive childcare in this country, and that's obviously, that is like putting the squeeze on lots of other countries around the world. I think in New Zealand it's like a tenth or something. I mean, it is absolutely punitive. It is ridiculous. On the other hand, there are people who do say that wouldn't it be nice if we were all to just kind of regard our children as a treasure, something to be loved and cherished in the few short years before they grow up. I mean, mine are already, big, hairy teenagers now, and you do think, did I pay enough attention? I don't know.
That's no way to talk about your daughters, Simon. No, look, I completely agree with you, but I think the days of, the mum staying at home raising the kids and dad going out and working.
Dad having a couple of mistresses in town.
Yeah, exactly. Gentlemen's club, feet up. The good old days, as we like to call them. Sadly, women came and ruined everything, as you know, Simon.
It's technically true.
Yeah. Unfortunately, those days are sadly gone.
And there's the man who caused it all, of course, Jacques Delors.
Me? Oh, right, okay.
Pictured there, he's gone. Any views on that? 98 years of age, good run. They said on Radio 4 that his pro-European, he virtually invented it. His hyper-pro-European views put him on a collision course with Margaret Thatcher. And I was thinking, well, he's outlasted her by about 15 years, so I suppose he won that one, didn't he, in that respect? But,
well, he's known as one of the fathers of the euro, which, as we all know, is a terrible idea. And I personally think will signal the end of the European Union as we know it. It's a financial disaster, the euro.
The funny thing is, he did acknowledge later in life that the euro had been essentially a failure, but he said the reason was not because it was a daft idea cooked up by him, but because there had been insufficient integration prior to the euro, which is basically, of course, what the Tories always said. You can't have a single currency without full political integration. But he was sort of acknowledging that and saying that's why we should have had that first.
But, I mean, then you go, how can you have one currency for these totally disparate economies like Greece or Germany?
Exactly, as long as you don't care whether Greece and Spain have, almost total youth unemployment, it's fine.
And I mean, let's be fair, none of those countries like working anyway, so maybe he had a point.
Moving on to the Star for the final section, very quickly, Francis.
Yes, this is Storm at Garrett. There was chaos, nose to tail on the motorway, flooding train stations. I went via King's Cross today to pick up some new trainers, and it was absolute chaos. There were people getting turned away.
You went to pick up some new trainers?
Yeah, in King's Cross.
So you could run home and avoid
Yes,
the traffic.
exactly. Well, look at me. I haven't run in a long time, Simon. But, yeah, so, it's just chaos. Basically, it amounts to a few drips of rain and everything shuts down.
This is the thing every winter, isn't it? We are reminded that we have no contingency at all. It's extraordinary how unable we are to cope.
I think I'd prefer a traffic jam to the trains at the moment, though.
Yeah.
One of our producers turned up at 9:30 tonight. He had a very long day on a train.
He was coming from the other side of Paddington.
You're stuck in there with SARS 38 or whatever brand you're on now as well, aren't you? Which is worse. I mean, I do find other people in a contained space at this time of year problematic. I don't know. They just all of them festering with germs.
Thanks for looking at me. What you were saying there.
And these are the ones that want to breed, I'd remind you. Anyway, That's our front pages. Coming up after the break, we have controversial tax cuts again, Rwanda farragos, and how we got a robot to nick all of that from the New York Times. See you in a couple of minutes.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan, Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks, the admission's free.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
And welcome back to Headliners. We're still here with Cressida Wetton, Francis Foster and myself, Simon Evans. So we have Cressida, Rishi Sunak, who, no, we haven't. Are we still going to do that? We've done that one, haven't we? We did that one in the headlines. I'm not going to do that one. Francis, we're going to go to small boat news now in the Times. Good news for the government. Rwanda has processed nearly 5 asylum claims out of every 1,000.
Well, absolutely. I mean, to be fair to those lads, they're absolutely smashing it. They're completing applications at a rate of 0.5%.
Amazing.
Which means they're 0.3% more effective than the civil service.
It's not their fault, though, is it? I would imagine it's not their fault, is it?
Well, the reality is that they don't have the capacity to process these claims. So this has been set up. The government has provided them with millions of pounds of funding in order to get these claims processed, and they simply can't do it. So as a result of that, what has happened is we're in this stasis. The UK has paid Rwanda £240 million with a further £150 million. So the reality is, this is looking completely dead in the water.
It's not great value for money, is it?
No, it's not. No, it's not. And this coming from...
We could have put each one of those refugees in, never mind a hotel room, they could have had a house on Bishop's Avenue.
Well, let's not go that far. They could probably afford a bed sit in Zone 3, Simon, in London. But yeah, it's just looking like this idea was terrible to start off with. And every time that I look at it, it just seems to get even worse.
Yeah.
So not only does it seem ridiculous that we're sending these people over to Africa, it's now become apparent that they can't even process anything.
Do you have a view?
Well, it's just all very depressing, isn't it? I don't know whether Labour are going to do any better. Their latest thing is they're going to process people before they get here.
Yeah.
But it's...
Nobody's coming out with gunboats off the coast of Calais yet, aren't they? Which is obviously it's where we're going to end up sooner or later. I don't know why they're so squeamish about it.
Yeah. I mean, look, I'm going to be honest with you. There's some people who are watching this who have listened to what you said and went, finally, someone's talking sense.
Well, you know, the coast of Tripoli would have been a better idea, but we are where we are. Media news in the Times, Cressida and the New York Times is once again fighting a rearguard action against high-tech pickpockets.
New York Times sues OpenAI and Microsoft for scraping content. So the New York Times it's suing them for billions of dollars over copyright infringement, alleging that the powerful technology companies used its information to train their AI to free ride. So I think that means they've trained their AI to bypass their what's it called, paywall.
Yeah.
And they presumably they think that would-be clients of theirs are going to.
It's probably even got a subscription, isn't it?
Yeah.
The AI, it can probably afford that.
Well, exactly. So
it was like I got one. It's about 50 pence a week or something now for the New York Times.
Right.
I think what it's done is it's gone back and it's looked at all its old copy. And sometimes you ask AI, like OpenAI or something, you ask it a question like, I don't know, you know, how important. Somebody quoted it had been asked a question about how Apple compared to General Motors or General Electric as the big, you know, huge industrial entities of the 50s and 60s.
Right.
In terms of employment and contribution to workfare and so on in America. And it gave quite a detailed and well-informed answer, and it was word for word the exact same as an article that appeared in the New York Times.
Right, so the AI has got a subscription, and it's telling you all the secrets.
Basically, it wasn't what you might call scraping. Makes it sound like it's kind of reading. It was literally just, you know, cut and paste,
But doesn't this make you think that this AI thing has been completely overrated if actually all they're doing is copying from the New York Times?
It does depend what kind of question you ask it, but I think if it sees a way to get away with it...
So it's basically a human being.
Fun enough, it's an 18-year-old student, with a deadline looming.
Claudine Gay.
I am interested, though. The New York Times, I made a veiled sort of reference to this in the introduction, only a few years ago was hemorrhaging money because Facebook was reusing its content and was taking all of its advertising revenue. It had somehow found a way so that the advertisers paid Facebook and Google search, you know. And I think it turned that around. I think it won that.
Yes, it has.
It's a pretty clever organisation. It's still got some heft, considering how old it is and how venerable it is and how perceived it is in America anyway to be like, you know, the kind of slow-moving, the old sort of old lady at Threadneedle Street kind of thing. Then there is I think there's quite an interesting battle coming here because AI is obviously going to be a very powerful thing, but there is still that thing of, well, who's paying for it exactly?
Well, this is it. And actually, who is creating the content? Because if what this is actually talking about here is really who owns the right to this particular type of content.
Yeah.
And if this is true, that this is what AI is effectively doing, they're not only doing it with articles like you said about General Motors, but things like restaurant reviews.
Yeah.
They can quite legitimately say, hang on a second, this is copyrighted.
Yeah.
And you cannot just come along and take our content and then repurpose it.
Absolutely. On the other hand, I asked AI recently to write a column in the style of the British comedian Simon Evans.
Yeah.
It was pretty good.
Was it?
Yeah.
Does that say a lot about AI or about your writing style, Simon?
Oh, I needed to give it a few tweaks, a little bit of fair dust, you know. Anyway, Francis the Independent, James cleverly makes an off-colour joke and gets away with it. A win for the surname, yet again.
So Downing Street said it was right that the Home Secretary had apologised for making the remarks. So they're effectively saying that the matter is closed. This is a storm in a teacup. I'm going to read you, Mr. Cleverly.
Storm in a cocktail glass.
Yeah, exactly. So what happened was he was at a Downing Street party. He was having a little bit of a chit-chat. No doubt he was sufficiently lubricated. And he told female guests at this event before Christmas a little bit of Riponol in her drink, or Hypnol, sorry, every night was not really illegal if it's only a little bit. Because basically he's saying that with his wife. He puts a little bit in her drink, and that way she's not too aware of the other options that are available to her.
So he was saying not so much like he uses it in order to have his wicked way with her on a nightly basis, more to keep her generally sedated, oblivious to the
And
whole...
crucially, it was a joke.
Yeah, oh, no,
and
absolutely. I just want to understand the nature of the joke. So he's not saying I give her a bit of Rohypnol because that gets her in the mood.
No.
Just to be absolutely clear, Rohypnol is not perceived to be an aphrodisiac.
No, it's not.
People are just confused, right? They just seem sort of unable to defend themselves.
Yeah, confused, and then they pass out.
Yeah.
And frequently the reason it's so popular amongst that type of offender is because the victim has no recollection of the event.
No, OK, right. So, really, he's not... I mean, it's a clumsy joke, but he's obviously not... He's not saying it in any kind of... it's not making a sexual, predatory sort of...
Well, I really get offended that you've talked about my closing joke to my set like that, Simon. He's nicked it, and now you've come along and denigrated it, mate.
There was... I'm going to tell you, this will be the joke that gets me cancelled, but Mark Lamar, do you remember him?
Yeah,
He was a big
great.
for a while and then hosted Buzzcocks. He came up with what he said was the shortest joke he had ever written was a single word, it's a portmanteau word, Rohypsilix. I'm giving you no explanations. Cressida, the odds of GB News providing the next Tory leader shorten yet again, according to the Telegraph.
Yes, again. Sir Jacob Rees-Mogg is the most popular Tory backbencher, so he's done really well. He won the most votes from readers of Conservative Home, which is often described as the Tory grassroots Bible. It sounds like a Tory interior design magazine, doesn't it?
It's very good, though, actually, Conservative Home. There's some good writers on there. It's more forthright than you might expect. I'm not sure it should be called grassroots, though. That makes it sound a bit socialist, doesn't it? I think it should be more like the AHA of the Tory membership.
Well, anyway, he's very liked. Apparently last year it was run by Lee Anderson, which I didn't know. He's popular. We all like doing his catchphrase here. Now then.
So between Rees-Mogg and Farage, I mean, well, we haven't had Kemi on here yet. She's probably still the #1 favourite, isn't she? I should think.
No,
I don't think she's mentioned in here. No,
she's not a backbencher.
Just third was.
She's not a backbencher.
Right.
Yeah. I don't think she is. She's still in charge, isn't she? Education or something? I can't remember.
Yes, I think so, yeah.
Not education, no. God, I can't remember what it is.
Oh, is it women? Is it...
It's the thing that allows her to get sort of stuck into the culture wars quite a bit, but anyway.
So, I think, obviously, credit to Jacob, but I also think that it says a lot about the Tory party and the fact that, to me, they're a complete busted flush and they've run out of ideas.
Well, I'd be very surprised if... I don't suppose anyone imagines that this would be... this is a sort of leadership-readying thing, but it will depend, I suppose, to some extent on how humiliated they are at the next general election, on whether the next leader comes from near the top of the cabinet or whether it's like a, big clean-out.
Yeah, one thing that I will say is, and I've made no bones about the fact that I think the Tory party are completely bankrupt out and... just run out of ideas. I don't think Labour are going to get this whacking great majority that everyone thinks they're going to. I don't think Keir Starmer has any ideas.
It will depend on the weather, I'm telling you. It will depend on the weather in November. The show is half done. In the third of 4, we have driverless cars, carless drivers and less car drivers. Maybe. We'll see you in a couple of minutes.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Wake up to the headlines with headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News is Britain's news channel, and now you can support it. All you have to do is scan that QR code that's up on your screen right now, or you can go to gbnews.com/support and become a GB News member. You'll have fantastic benefits. We're also going to organise special events where you as GB News members can meet the presenters, the on-screen faces. Scan the QR code or go to gbnews.com/support. Thank you so much.
Welcome back to Headliners. We're into the back line and over to the Independent, Francis. One of the most famous 10-year horizons has been cut to 2.
Indeed, driverless cars could be on some UK roads by the end of 2026, Transport Secretary Mark Harper has said. So that is going to be very, very, very interesting because, you know, we've been talking about this. We've said that there's going to be, you know, it's around the corner, and it seems to be around the corner in 2 years' time. But that's not what's interesting about this for me. What's interesting about this for me is the impact it is going to have on our society as a whole, particularly when you look at jobs like driving, you know, taxis, driving vans, lorries, whatever they may be. These are industries that employ tens of thousands of people. These are industries that give people jobs. Jobs give people dignity. They give people a sense of being, a lot of things. And you wonder what is going to happen to these types of people who do those jobs when they disappear.
They'll be taken to the knackers yard like the horses were.
Exactly. I'm glad you're keeping it positive, Simon. It's great, mate. You know.
Also, no driving instructors and no 17-year-old me taking 5. I took 5 tests.
I know.
And I'm absolutely delighted for no more driving tests.
My daughter's failed one. My wife is absolutely furious. She regards it as like the most important modern accomplishment for an independent young woman. I'm saying to her, 2 years, that's it, max, it's gone. I mean, she lives in London for the next 2 years anyway, by the time she
so you don't think she'll do it now?
I don't think there's any need for it, to be honest.
Really?
Yeah, I don't think there's any need to learn to drive a car. To be honest, it's not like it was in the old days. You get in the car, you get a bit of independence and freedom. Nowadays, as we've seen from the front pages, you're immediately stuck on a road traffic jam, you know, and you don't have the same sort of, you don't have the same thrill as you used to.
Well, when I got my first car, I couldn't believe it. I remember saying to the driving person in the test centre, "Are you sure I've passed?" I just couldn't believe it, and it was a huge sense of accomplishment. So that's taken away.
And now you've ended up on a barge.
No licence for that.
Yeah, I do think that it's going to be. I understand what you're saying. It will happen more smoothly. It will take quite a long time before there's any kind of massive laying off of taxi drivers. And for what it's worth, I don't know if this is the case, but I live in Brighton, which is, I guess, you know, not entirely typical in various ways. Most of the taxi drivers down there they're already feeling the pinch. Do you know what I mean? It's not a booming industry, and a lot of them are people who are maybe semi-retired. They've sort of thought, I don't want to completely stop working. You know, I'll get a car. I'm not saying on all of them by any means, but I don't think it's a sort of. There are other examples. I know what you mean, like haulage drivers and so on, of course, but they still have to get out of the van at the other end and take the parcel onto the pavement. I don't think that's going to disappear overnight. You know, and we've seen the capacity of ASLEF to keep jobs that are essentially redundant and superfluous for the last 30 years have been ticking over. So I would get unionised quickly if you're a driver. Guardian, Cressida. And Greece wants its marbles back so badly it's willing to grease the museum's palm, yes!
Greece would offer major treasures to UK for Parthenon marbles, Minister says. So, yeah, they're getting into this bargaining idea. They're talking about having, like, a rotating cast of fantastic treasures.
Wonderful.
Which sounds like quite a good idea, doesn't it? Because the Parthenon marbles have just been there for a long time.
Yeah. Have you been to see them?
No, I don't think I have.
Have you seen them, Francis?
Oh, I have indeed. I've seen them many times.
They are impressive.
They are impressive.
I do think they could be quite easily created in replica and quite adequately, you know, you could even have a sort of hologram or like a massive AV display.
Yeah.
Well, I know this is not quite the same thing, but I went to see a cave painting. I think it was in Lascaux, one of the French places anyway, and you have to go into a hole in the mountainside and go walk for a mile underground in darkness. And my wife and kids saw this and just bolted. They refused to go in. The kids were quite little. They went off to the visitors' centre, where you can see the entire cave in perfect replica, in comfort. You know,
interesting.
And you see, that is why our society is going to the dogs.
Well,
where's the striving?
I went in, and I have to say it's one of the most memorable things I've ever seen. But
there you go.
It was a really good visitor
Because
centre.
you crawled. I'm picturing the road to Wigan Pier, squatting, trying to get there.
It was also the French guide and his French accent when he's doing the English. And it's a cave that has the only weasel in cave art, in Mediterranean cave art, and to hear a Frenchman refer repeatedly, look at the weasel, that was worth the price of admission alone. But, yeah, visitor centres can be very effective, and I do think, actually, it's high time the world's museums and art galleries got their act together and allowed you to experience all the world's great art to a much more satisfactory degree.
Look, there's part of me that agrees with you. There's also part of me that goes, no, they're ours. They're ours. They're called the Elgin marbles. Yeah, after Lord Elgin.
Bank.
Yes.
64% of the UK, 64% apparently in favour of returning them. So
It's
not a fashionable view, Francis.
Well, it doesn't matter.
Francis caught out against the tide. He's on the wrong side of history. The Tavistock now, Francis. You're on the right side of this question, I suspect.
Well, of course I am. Absolutely. Why can't they transition at the age of 2? Children under 5 referred to NHS Transgender Clinic, and this is the Tavistock in Portman, which will close next year, and it had no lower age limit for referrals. So 382 children aged 6 and under have been sent to the Gender Identity Development Service over the past decade. And on my show, Trigonometry, we interviewed Marcus Evans, who was the former head of nursing. And what he actually said was, when he was working there, because he was one of the original whistleblowers, one of the reasons why he got really worried and actually had to go public with his concerns about the Tavistock and Portman was because he believed that it was less to do with patient care and far more to do with ideology. Yeah. And you can see this. You see this 5-year-olds, 4-year-olds. You just think to yourself, how will they know anything about their gender ideology?
I watched a video today from an anthology put out by the Babylon Bee, their end-of-year anthology of satirical. And they have a sketch, very funny sketch, in which an American girl goes into a tattoo parlour and wants to get a tattoo done. She's only 14. She pretends to be older. And he goes, you're too young. She goes, oh, I know what I want, really, I do. I'm 14, go on, let me. He goes, no, you need your parents' ID. And then she goes through all these other things. Can I have a gun? Can I smoke a cigarette? Can I drink a beer? No, no, no. OK, how about gender-reaffirming surgery? Yeah, sure, fine, gets out his cut. And it's a very funny sketch and it's accurate. But she's 14.
Yeah.
That's like an old woman in these terms.
Well, the problem is that if you subscribe to this idea, you think the younger you catch it, the more help you can give.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which, of course, I personally don't agree with. But
Why would you want your child to go through life struggling with their gender identity as if it's going to, you know, ruin it for them? Yeah. Oh, well, I'm glad the clinic is closing, but I don't think the war is entirely won yet. Anyway, Cressida, the Daily Mail, news on the latest Agatha Christie adaptation to be furiously blinking the international distress signal to us in Morse code.
Star of new Agatha Christie adaptation, Murder is Easy, David Johnson, reveals he initially turned down the role because he's not a fan of colourblind casting. So David Johnson is black, or is he mixed race? I don't know, but he's not white. And what I love about this is he initially turned it down. He had a moment of, I'm not really into that, but he did ultimately take the role, because who can turn down work?
OK, I'll do it.
Pretty much, But, you know, I guess good for him. He's
well, I mean, I suppose he's at least willing to talk about the issues or whatever. It's not, for me, the colour... But actually, in a way, it's not colourblind casting, is it? Because they have said that he is a Nigerian, and they are specifically using this murder, which is not one I've read or know anything about. They're using it to explore the idea of the end of empire and you know, retracting mother country and the post-colonial experience. So it's not colourblind.
Finally,
it's just using an Agatha Christie's corpse has been gutted and its skin worn as a suit to pursue another end.
Well, you know, they did change the original character who was white to Nigerian. I can't wait until we see Hercule Poirot as a 60-year-old. Hercule Poirot as a 60-year-old Chinese woman. I think it's going to be fantastic.
You can't do any further indignity by that casting than you've done to him by calling him Hercule.
What's his name?
Hercule.
No, it's not. It's Hercule, mate.
Hercule.
I like it your way.
We're in England.
It sounds like Curly Whirly.
Yeah. And by the way, whatever I say can't be any worse than how they're going to be butchering Agatha Christie.
No, it is getting so tiresome. It's always Agatha Christie as well. They did the John Malkovich one, which presented post-Brexit Britain as basically worse than Germany in the 1930s.
Well, I mean, technically it is, because at least the trains worked in Germany.
Very true. Staying with the Mail, Francis, predictably enough, we gave them an inch, they took a mile.
Exactly. So the Daily Mail, government scraps Brexit dividend plan to bring back imperial measurements in shops after practically everybody says they prefer metric measures. But Brexiteers say harmless change should still go ahead.
Who are the Brexiteers?
I don't know.
1% by the sound.
Yeah, nobody wants this. I don't understand why they want it changed.
I don't need it to go, but I still like using pounds, inches, you know, miles in the vernacular in my conversation. I never use grams or meters to describe anything in my conversation. But I'm perfectly capable of going to the shops and going, half a pound of butter in my head without kind of checking that. Do you know what I mean?
But do you have your country back when you're saying that?
I'd like to see the research, you know, because it sounds like they've been asked a very emotive set of questions.
So there are greengrocers who fought for a long time for the right to double-price stuff. So that I think, you know, it's been 50 years now. I remember when it came out, there was a book of sort of overheard sayings and graffiti and stuff. Nigel Rees, I think, part of it. And one overheard two old ladies, one of them saying, "I don't mind decimalisation. I just wish they'd waited until all the old people had died." Well, of course, that's how it is, isn't it? That's how everything is, you know. And having become one of those people. But I will never stop thinking in feet and inches. Can you tell me how tall you are in metres and centimetres?
No.
1 metre 82, which is exactly 6 foot.
Oh, OK. So you've got that up.
But that's because I'm a narcissist, so there we are.
You don't look it, I have to say. One more section to go. It's deliciously self-referential with GB News content foxing and bewildering the legacy media. That is all coming up very shortly. See you there.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests, and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan, Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks, the admission's free.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Headliners. Cressida. It seems that a pretty obvious joke on GB News has been confusing the public, or at least the Metro.
At least the Metro. Confusion as GB News presenter who champions free speech blocks critics. And before we get into the confusing details, I think we've got a clip of what happened on Christmas Day night.
OK.
Paul to host the show, you want me to stop hosting the show? Fine, OK, we'll do... OK, fine. OK, fine, we will do... We'll have it your way. We'll have it...
Andrew. Yes. Thank you very much. I want to thank our host. I want to thank Andrew Doyle, and I want to thank Paul Cox. And there we go. And what we do is we've got our calendar. This is still available for next year. So if you can...
For goodness sake, I'm sorry, we're not having that. Advertising his calendar on our Boxing Day newspaper show. Let's get some professionalism back in the room.
I can't believe people really thought that that was him losing
Or
it.
do they? I mean, I don't know if the Metro really... They can't believe that
I don't think the
that's
Metro
real.
do, but they said that Twitter was abuzz with people who really could... I mean, I don't... It's
Well,
hard to say, isn't it?
if you weren't familiar with the show, maybe you'd think, what's going on here? But that's true of any television. But if you know the colleagues and what they're like, it's a shame we cut Paul out of that clip.
Yeah.
He was involved
And
as well.
basically, it was a skit based on that time that I lost my temper with Lewis and threw a glass of water over him and then left and stopped the show. And no, of course not. But every host has lost his temper to a degree with Lewis at some point.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, every time.
I thought they looked great in the black tie, though. I wonder whether we shouldn't institute that on a regular basis. I didn't realise it was black tie for Christmas, but still.
This also is talking about the blocking business.
Right,
and people have been accusing Andrew of blocking people.
Yes.
But I don't think that's what's been happening. I've never heard of block lists before today.
Yeah, you get them,
So it sounds like some AI stuff is going on, or there's some not AI, some automatic blocking is happening.
Yeah.
So it's not as
but
it
even
sounds.
if he does block them, that's entirely his right.
Well, of course
they
it
say,
is.
oh, it's a bit ironic, free speech champion.
Yeah.
I don't know, again, whether it's performative bafflement or whether they really don't understand the difference. But the point of free speech is that you're not allowed, either legally or sort of commercially or through coercion, to prevent somebody else from being heard. You aren't expected to listen to them. That's a completely
you're not
different
compelled
issue.
to listen to
especially
Andrew's
on the format
ideas.
of Twitter. You're not... You can't enforce your vulnerability to their endless pestering and bad faith questioning.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and it's also as well, it's such a non-story what people on Twitter are upset.
Yes.
Really?
Yeah.
Really? I've never heard anybody ever be upset on Twitter. Come on.
I'm afraid that the Metro does stoop that low quite often, but nevertheless. Anyway, Francis, if I didn't know any better, I think this was a stunt as well, this next story, but apparently it's true in the Times.
Listen, I think you're being incredibly fat-phobic, and we are body positive here at GB News, Simon.
Go on.
28-stone man sues over being kicked off PE teaching course. The university said...
I hope he wasn't literally kicked.
I mean, if he was, let's be fair, he's not going to go very far, is he? Anyway.
Sorry, that is out of order. 28 stone, though. That's not like overweight. That's not chunky. That's clinically
morbidly
obese.
obese.
Yeah, of course.
You cannot project an interest in physical exercise in that situation, however well-informed you are.
Well, this is it. So he was... his name is David Lopez, and he was granted a medical exemption by a doctor as he could not stand or walk for prolonged periods of time. So how is he going to be a PE teacher if he can't stand or walk?
I mean, he will no doubt launch some kind of video, you know, like some TikTok channel or something now, and have millions of followers who find it hilariously funny that he knows exactly how you should do a reverse squat.
Well, this is it. He knows the theory. He knows the theory, and he can say, "Don't do as I did, do as I say."
Yeah.
Well, it's like, but
maybe...
would you go to a cardiologist if you sat down and in front of him was a bacon sandwich and a cigarette?
Would you run on a treadmill, which is what most physical exercise people do? Would you run on a treadmill while a 28-stone man was standing next to you with a clipboard and a pen?
Actually, I would do, because I'd film it. I'd go, here's my personal trainer. I'd put it on TikTok, it'd go viral.
He could be very motivating. There's
He
nothing
might be.
like an obesity documentary to make you put the biscuits down.
His back is against the wall now.
Yeah.
We'll see where he goes from here.
Yeah.
Cressida, Velasquez masterpiece, vanishes into thin air, or at least been withdrawn from sale, which is slightly less dramatic.
Well, there you go. Express mystery as £28 million painting vanishes into thin air again, just before it was due to be sold. So presumably this is an insurance... I mean, allegedly, what can we say?
We have seen it, though, right? It does exist. This is a Velasquez that goes in and out of existence over the last couple of hundred years, apparently. I think it might be the one. My wife read a book about a Velasquez that comes and goes. And I don't know, they have this tendency to disappear during the war and all that sort of thing, of course, be secreted in case.
They've got to be...
Anyway, but this one, well, we don't know too much. Let's see if we can squeeze this into the last 40 seconds, Francis. The sad decline of the legacy press is having a knock-on effect on the vernacular street architecture of Rome.
Yeah, indeed it is. You know, so the beloved kiosks, which form part of the landscape of Rome, they are slowly dying out because nobody is buying news legacy media anymore, like newspapers and magazines. So they've had to resort to sell hot priest calendars to stay afloat.
I've seen these hot priest calendars on Twitter. They're apparently quite a cult object. People get them for Christmas presents. And the priests are pretty hot. Some of them go back to the 40s and 50s, you know, when young Italian men had a little something about them. Yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah, no, I definitely recommend them. Yeah.
You recommend them?
But the other thing about it is they're saying because Rome is now basically just a tourist resort, nobody even reads Italian. I mean, they'd be better off selling the Express in the Sun.
Yeah, or just a hot priest. Anyway, something for all the kids to love.
The show is nearly over. Let's take another quick look at Thursday's front pages. The Daily Mail, Hunt, plan to slash death tax by half, and Mariah Carey is splitting up. The Times, Labour will promise big expansion of healthcare. Delors and Margaret Thatcher have finally been reunited in heaven. Financial Times, global defence order books bulge as Ukraine puts budget on war footing. The Eye, homes bought up for Axed HS2 rail line are rented out for millions. The Guardian, domestic abuse survivors have lost trust in us. The Star, Gridlock, that's all we have time for. Thank you to my guests, Cressida Wetton and Francis Foster. We're back tomorrow at 11 p.m. and I'll return with Stephen Allen and Jonathan Cogan. That will be an absolutely roaring show. See you then. Stay tuned for breakfast. Good night.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello again, it's Aidan McGibbon here from the Met Office with the GB News forecast. It stays wet and windy over the next 24 hours, but not as wet or as windy. The rain turns more showery and the hill snow in the far north also eases, but low pressure stays with us. Storm Garrett was named because of the very treacherous conditions we've seen across northern Scotland during the last 12 to 18 hours. And there will continue to be some heavy rain and hill snow across the Northern Isles, along with 80-mile-per-hour wind gusts for a time overnight. Elsewhere across the country, it stays windy. The rain turns to showers, and the bulk of these showers will be in the west, with some clear spells further east. But with a blustery feel overnight, it's not going to be a particularly chilly start to Thursday. Having said that, it stays cold across Scotland, with further hill snow expected into the day on Thursday. Outbreaks of rain at lower levels and certainly plenty of showers or longer spells of rain elsewhere across the country. The spells of rain will be interspersed by brighter intervals, and it's not going to be quite as windy as it has been during the last 24 hours, with wind gusts of 40 to 50 miles an hour. 12 Celsius in the south, 5 to 8 further north, so staying chilly across Scotland. And Friday starts off bright in many places, particularly towards central and southeastern parts of the country, but there'll be further cloud and outbreaks of rain elsewhere. Again, hill snow or even snow to lower levels across northern Scotland and into the weekend.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Have a great Saturday night with me, Leo Curse, on this Saturday Night Showdown. It's a crazy world out there, so come and make fun of it with me, my panel of comedians, and a couple of people who actually know what they're talking about. This Saturday Night Showdown is your front row ticket to the clown show every Saturday, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests, and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Wake up to the headlines with headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Good evening, you're with GB News. Police Scotland have declared a major incident, urging drivers stuck in snow on the A9 in particular to remain in their vehicles. Footage circulating on social media shows cars stranded across the Highlands. This is before snow ploughs were able to start clearing a way through and getting drivers out of that area. Well, it's all down to Storm Garrett, which has also meant there's power cut to 18,500 homes in Scotland. There's heavy rain, strong winds, and rail passengers on the East Coast main line between London and Scotland were advised today not to travel. And thousands of travellers at airports have also faced delays, with flights grounded. And at the port of Dover, ferry passengers facing delays as well of up to an hour and a half today. That's due to French police being off sick. It comes amid increased demand at the port as thousands head away for those post-Christmas trips. Those who missed booked ferries were being put onto the next crossing where space was available. Politics, and Jeremy Hunt has announced the spring budget will be set out on March the 6th next year. Reports also suggesting Downing Street could axe inheritance tax and reduce income tax. Sir Keir Starmer has seemingly instructed his front bench team to finalise their manifesto plans within weeks. The Labour leader telling shadow ministers to have their policy proposals ready by mid-January. Let's take you to the United States, where the Michigan Supreme Court has rejected an attempt to remove the former President Donald Trump from the 2024 presidential ballot. That ruling in sharp contrast to the recent court case in Colorado, where Mr. Trump was disqualified from running for president in that state due to his alleged role in the Capitol Hill riots. That decision has been paused, and there is an appeal planned. In France, the daughter of Jacques Delors says the former president of the European Commission has died. The 98-year-old was a leading figure on the French political left in the 1980s and became known to many across Britain through his dealings with the then Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher and the creation of the euro. France's President Emmanuel Macron honoured his fellow politicians, saying he'd been a tireless architect of our Europe. Jacques Delors, who died today. On TV, online, DAB+ radio and the TuneIn app, this is GB News.
One of the highlights of the Farrar Show is talking pints. I mean, who else would drink a pint of beer live on British television? Me, of course. But I do it with some very interesting people. They come from the worlds of politics and the arts and sport, people you've never heard of who've achieved amazing things. And the joy of talking pints is you kind of forget you're on telly, because it's like two people together having a pint in the pub or even having a cup of tea together. And my style of interviewing, well, it's not really interviewing, it's genuinely having a conversation, trying to find out what motivates people, what are they all about, what are the things we don't know about them. And it's amazing how frank people have been on Talking Pints. So here are some of the highlights over the course of the last year.
Good to see you.
And you.
Now,
I thought you were in time, didn't I? Just about.
She arrived about a minute ago. But that doesn't matter, she did. That'd have been huge disappointment if you hadn't, I can promise you.
Oh.
Now, you sort of arrive in our lives as Jordan in the middle, late 1990s, and suddenly there you are, and everyone's talking about you.
Yeah.
And that's over 25 years ago.
Yes.
And you've never really left our lives. You're there constantly, every bit of your life, the good bits, the disappointing bits. It never, ever goes away. What's it like being that famous? Can you live an ordinary life at all?
Well, I don't think I am famous. I don't know any different. Yeah, but I really don't know any different. When when I go home, I just do normal things with my friends. Some of my friends are famous. It's like, when you get to know me, people don't understand how I'm, like, out there all the time in the papers, yet I'm just at home normal in my pyjamas, drinking tea and just being normal.
But when you're out and about, you know, you go shopping or you go places, people recognise you, they want selfies or whatever else there are, I don't know.
Yeah, but they used to. It's more like the kids now, especially Harvey. He's so popular, Harvey.
Yeah, we're going to...
Yeah.
no. And we're
Sorry, I'm rushing for your questions.
No, don't worry about it. But I mean, you know, and you've done the lot, haven't you? You know, I'm a Celebrity, Big Brother, absolutely. I mean, there's almost nothing. You know, you're the Queen of Glam, really, aren't you?
Well, the thing that's a shame, there was a programme on the other day which I had absolute nothing to do with it, called The Rise and Fall of Me. And I was really worried, thinking, oh, my God, what's it going to be about? And actually, it does show that I have done a lot in my life. But nowadays, people are just so interested in writing about putting me down, like rubbish stories, when really they should embrace what I've done. And today, I'm so proud that the petition that I did for Harvey...
Well, this is amazing.
Yeah, can I ask you something about it? So now...
Yeah.
Because I don't know how it goes. It's something to do with the bills. It was in the House of Commons, and now it goes to the House of Lords. What does that mean?
Let's just get the story right here. So Harvey, your son...
Yes.
You know, was born with some really tough disabilities.
He's got SOD, which is septic optic dysplasia. And basically, it's part of the front line of the brain, the pituitary gland. It's abnormal. So that's why he's blind. He's got ADHD, opposite deficit disorder, Prader-Willis.